Hi guys, it's Minx here, and I am joined by Luton for another episode of MLD.
Hi guys,
How
how
you
you
doing,
doing?
Luton?
Hello, I'm good. I'm not too bad. Christmas time, New Year, we're all here.
Yep, we have Christmas out the way, New Year's out the way, and it's time for us to look back on the previous year and think, wow, that was really disappointing. Or not, because there were some good games last year, and that's what we're here to talk about. We're going to pick five of our favorite games of the previous year, and just celebrate it. Just for the record, we're going to say that the window for this is from December of 2013 to December of 2014, beginning of December 2014. Because, like, if it comes out so close to Christmas, you never really have a chance to play it, that kind of thing. And nothing really comes out in December most of the time anyway. So,
Yeah.
that's how we're doing it.
One thing I
So,
would say is I was quite surprised at for when I actually had to sit down and think about what games I was going to choose. All through the year, everyone was saying like, "Oh, there's too many games to play, and so many games come out all the time now." And then when I actually had to sit down,
weren't any good.
yeah, when I actually had to sit down and think about it, I was like, it's actually really difficult. Like on one hand, I'm going like, yeah, this. It was surprising, when you actually sit down and think about it. There's a lot of games out, just not a lot of good games out. So.
Yeah, I mean, I had some that I ruled out from my list that I enjoyed, but I didn't think were like I liked
Yeah.
Infamous Second Son, for example, but I never put that on my list because it was still a generic open world game, even though it was fun, if you know
Yeah,
what I mean. It wasn't
yeah.
anything particularly special about it.
Well, I had a lot of games that I rediscovered or just literally played for the first time this year as well. They just didn't come out this year, So it was like,
Yeah, The Last of Us I played this year.
yeah, that's really good. And I played Remember Me again because I really enjoyed that game. So yeah, there's a lot of different things, and there's like Civ and stuff which everybody plays all the time. But anyway, so why don't we get into it with your first one, Minx?
Okay, my first pick for my games of the year is Jazpunk.
Mm.
This was an indie, I guess, type title that was released at the beginning of the year, and it's just absolutely batshit crazy yet genius at the same time. It's like for me, it was a better parody of like the spy genre than like something like Austin Powers. It genuinely made me laugh out loud, and very few video games have ever managed to achieve that. I've rarely ever been in stitches over a video game, but
Yeah.
this one was just, it has so many genius comic moments. It's too hard to like even list them all. It's a short game, about 3 to 4 hours, I'd say. But during that 3 to 4 hours, you will just be engrossed in this crazy, crazy world. And I don't know whether you're using a spider to like scare away a a waiter in a sushi bar, which you have to point, or you're like hitting fly people with the fly swatter in the streets and things. It's just absolutely crazy, and has some of the most comic moments I've ever experienced in a video game. And while it was short, and while it could have probably had a bit more meat to it, I still haven't played anything like it.
Mm.
And for that reason, I'm going to give it a Game of the Year sort of like award, as it were. This is in no particular order, but like a Game of the Year award for my favorite games of 2014, and something that everyone should play if you haven't played it already. It's on Steam. It's pretty reasonably priced. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah.
It's really awesome.
I haven't played Jazpunk, but I did have a little look at it, and we were talking about it before we started this. It does look absolutely mental, but something I said was that there's a lot of games out there at the moment which are just mad. They're just off the wall crazy.
Yeah.
But this one looked like it was still insane, but had actually been like nicely finished, which is something that's kind of unusual. It looked quite polished. It looked
it's
quite
a real
clean.
problem.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not going to take. Well, I am going to take jabs because I don't like Surgeon Simulator very much, and I don't like Iron Bread. And I thought they were fairly terrible games, if I'm honest with you. That it just doesn't. They don't have the soul Jazpunk does.
Yeah, I saw your
And
bread one, and you just looked like you were frustrated with it more than
I
enjoying
was
it.
pissed. I mean, everyone thought it was. I mean, it did really well. Everyone thought it was hilarious, but at the same time, I was just genuinely really fed up with the fucking game. I thought it was really, really, really awful, and I don't know. I just don't like. I don't like that sort of like crazy frustration game that sort of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
come
yeah.
out. I like my games to actually be witty sometimes, and this is I'm thinking of the Bard's Tale, the old RPG classic. That's a funny game as well. There's not many games that are funny, and
It looks,
Jazpunk
yeah.
succeeds at it.
It looks like it's been quite clever in its humor, do you know, rather than
Yes,
just
it
like,
is.
let's make something that falls off the table and goes fucking crazy, you know, which is what seems like some of these other things, like, oh look, it's fallen and you can't do it, and it's like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's hilarious in its irritation, but like beyond that, it's just like, what is it, you know? Whereas this looks like they've
It's
actually
subtle
constructed,
sometimes as well.
yeah,
It,
and I think that's so much
I,
better. Yeah.
yeah. It does a good job of conveying humor in a polished game. It's very, very rare, and
Yeah.
it deserves to be applauded for it. So anyway,
There you
that's
go.
my pick.
Okay.
Jazpunk.
Okay, so my first one, I'm going to go straight in also with my kind of. I was sort of, I've been convalescing and sort of thinking about what I wanted it to be. I think actually Alien Isolation, having completed it last night, I did a 6-hour live stream last night. And finally, sort of for the second time now, I've completed it my first time for a review, but for the second time, Alien Isolation. And Alien Isolation, it's been a really awesome year for me with that game. The first time I put some videos out there, they were well received, but for the game itself, it's just so epic on so many levels. Got some very applauded reviews and some not, but I just thought it was one of the best games, and I think the negativity that it did get was like misplaced. I think it was people that didn't understand it, or just frankly were not very good at playing the game, and they got pissed off because they weren't very good at it. You know, it was very much your kind of creep stealthy game, but the fear in the game was absolute, you know. Some survival horror games and things, and there's all the jump scare nonsense that we've talked about before, but this game, whilst it did have some jump scare, there was just a genuine fear all the way through, especially in the first half of the game. Alien Isolation, it's so nostalgic, like when you look back to the original Alien film, and they have just polished that so well with all of the like lo-fi tech that you have to use, to the point where at some point you actually let go of the mouse because you're just like, okay, I'm going to just do this on the keyboard because it's much easier, like when you're interfacing with a computer or something. The alien itself, just like the level of design that goes into it, the way that it moves, and then its AI as well is just so high compared to other titles. Everything about the game just played out really, really well. Some people had elements of the main story they disliked, some that they thought were too long or, you know, detracted from the overall kind of pace of the game. But for me, again, I completed it a second time last night. I just thought it was an amazing game. It's got to be my game of the year just for the fact that it was such a step away. And they didn't hype the game as well, which I think was a massive thing. They actually worked off the premise of like, we're not going to show too much or talk too much about the game. We're just going to like put it there. And I think as well, because it came after Colonial Marines, you know, and that was such a load of rubbish. I think they were kind of almost maybe a little bit nervous about that. But everything just kind of came together in that game, and I thought it was totally amazing.
It's obviously I don't think I agree with you on. I mean, that said, I'm not saying it's a bad game. I definitely fell into the park of being bad at the game, so I didn't enjoy it because I'm very pushed for time and I have a very busy video game playing related life.
Yeah.
I really just didn't. I couldn't play something that involved so much repetition and so much slow pacing. I did appreciate the atmosphere. I'm not going to say I didn't feel scared because I really, really did, and it certainly did what it meant to do a lot well.
Yeah.
From someone who's played, I guess, all the Alien-related games, even since like the Jaguar, Alien versus Predator and stuff, it was probably the one that encapsulated the feeling of the film, the original film at least, better than anything else. And it should be applauded for that. And I don't by any means think it was a bad title. Yeah. I just found it was a title that wasn't for me. And I just found myself frustrated. And I was like, I haven't got time to just do another, like that 15 minutes again sort of thing. I got seen and then I was just killed instantly.
Let me ask you as well, like, how far did you actually get with the game? That's it. Because I actually found there was like a very interesting sort of correlation between how people sort of viewed it and how far they actually got through. So like, where did you actually get through? Because I know you're very busy.
About 4 hours, I'd say. Like I got to like I just cleared like this big area of androids.
Yeah.
And then it was that pretty much. That's as far as I got.
I think that's like the first. I think that's the first synthetics area that you get to, right? Something like that.
Yeah. It was after the first encounter with the androids. There was like a lot of them, and I had to go through rooms after rooms after rooms.
Yeah.
And I kept getting seen and killed. And I was just like, "Fuck this."
The thing is with the game, and actually, I've completed it twice now, and the first half of the game is brutally unforgiving. It's significantly more difficult. If any of you guys are thinking of getting the game, be prepared that the first half is significantly difficult, and it's just to do with the equipment that you have. Once you actually get some, like, you know, firearms and some other little bits and pieces later on, it becomes more manageable. Still difficult, but manageable, right? But in the first half, it's brutal. Like this, the medical bay that you go through right at the beginning of the game, I got stuck there for ages because you don't have anything to deal or deter the alien with other than like your flare or whatever. So you're really stuck, and I just got stuck in this one room forever. I got killed like 5 times.
I got through that without a death, just chance, I think, just by sheer chance. I just ran and it didn't see me.
The medical bay was always my worst part. Like when I was down at Creative Assembly first time and I was actually playing it, got stuck there forever. And then one actually did it as well. But yeah, the first half is significantly difficult. The other one is more difficult as well for kind of various reasons, but it's more manageable in the way that you can move around. So I think that was a bit dissuading for a lot of people. But anyway, that's my first choice. I think for me personally, it was my game for this year, just because it was so different than everything else that's out there and that I played. And I just thought it came together really well. I think a part of it is just that I love that universe, and I thought it was fantastic to actually have a game that did it so well. Anyway, what's your second one, Minx?
My second one is another game I believe you haven't played, which is Ways, Sometimes Monsters. It's a game made in RPG Maker that was released on Steam by a studio called Vagabond Dog. It's incredibly interesting and unusual game. It is a life simulator where you as a individual have to try and get across America to stop your former partner getting married to somebody because you're still madly in love with them. But you're down on your luck and you're really skint on money, so you have to make lots of different decisions and moral choices to make money to get across you have a time limit as well to get across there before the wedding happens, and each day actually passes, so you have to think about how fast you want to do things, that kind of thing. And it's you can choose your character's race, gender, sexuality, that kind of thing as well, so there's a lot to it, which is kind of awesome. I like games where I can play a character that I like to make, which you'll see from another one of my choices as well, I'm sure. But I really, really, really enjoyed it. And the game's called what it is because its sort of tagline is, not tagline, but something they say is, are we always sometimes monsters? So you can make moral decisions in this game in order to get you to your goal, and you can make really horrific, disturbing, messed up decisions. Some of the worst I have ever made in a video game. People were genuinely shocked by some of the things I did in order to get across. I played the game as a complete sociopath. I didn't care about anything except getting to the other side of the country. Whatever the cost, I did it. And there's lots of multiple endings as a result of your behavior as well previously.
Can you give one example of that?
Okay, so there's a bit where you need a car to get from this town to the next town. And it's like a one-horse trailer park type town. So you have to get this car from this individual. Then he challenges you to a race to see who gets the car, basically. And if you lose, you have to work for him, so you'll be stranded there, so you won't make the wedding. So I cut his brakes, and he drove into a wall and blew up, and he sort of falls out the car on fire, and then I didn't know he had any, but 5 kids run out a nearby house, and they're like, Papa! And they're like crowding around his body as he's dying. So and then awful. We just take the other car and get the fuck out of there. I normally am not a big fan of these JRPG-ish sort of, or even RPG Maker games, but you're kind of selling it to me quite big right now. So. It was awesome. Unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I think sometimes there's, like I've said this before as well, there can be a bit of a lack of narrative in games nowadays, in especially the larger titles, and it can kind of not work so well. But especially with the indie games, they're often a lot more creative with their narratives, and like this as well, sounds hilarious and kind of amazing at the same time. So it kind of makes me want to check it out, really. I made someone a paraplegic at some point in my journey as well. I kicked a satellite dish off a roof, and it landed in their spine below. Oh my god. Okay. I'd like to say actually that for me, by the way, Always Sometimes Monsters is my pick for game of the year. I really liked it. I was torn between that and another game that I'm going to talk about in a bit, but I've decided overall I like that slightly more, the other one, even though the other one is still amazing. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay, my next one is going to be Far Cry 4. Now, Far Cry 4 is a big AAA game, but I was always a massive fan of Far Cry. And Far Cry 4 actually had a bit of a rocky start. There was a lot of people had issues with the game, but they kind of actually did iron that out pretty quickly and quite well, I thought. But just as a game itself, now I've sort of got a reasonable way into it. I actually started doing it for my YouTube channel, and then I stopped because it just kind of, this actually brings me on to something else as well, really. But I stopped doing my LP of it this week for Far Cry because it just didn't generate the kind of interaction that I was expecting, you know? And I think that kind of draws me to a bit of something where I kind of think about like, do people really want to watch people let's play and stuff? I've talked about this before. But anyway, as the game itself, it was just such a fantastic progression on from Far Cry 3. It's always very difficult when you have like a well-established title, especially within AAA, to follow it up with a new one, because people are like, oh, you've just updated it a little, you've reskinned it, it's just the same game but in a different place. But with Far Cry 4, they really have done such a fantastic job with making it feel the same game but the next one on, you know, which is so difficult to do. It's such a double-edged sword of giving people the same thing that they love about the previous title, but enough new content and enough new narrative that it's so engaging that it feels like you're getting a whole brand new game. That's a very difficult thing to do, and I think they really did it with Far Cry 4. For sure, I think very much like Alien Isolation, it's a bit of one where it's kind of down the line for people. Some people just don't like that kind of game. Some people do. I love the fact that it has like this kind of focused storyline, the main narrative that you can follow it through, and you can just, if you want to, you can follow that sort of primary axis, you know. But then you can easily just kind of go off and do random shit. And it's one of these games where it can be like, if you want it to be, it can be a very serious, kind of straightforward story of a game. It can be single player, just play through like that. But if you want to, it can be a crazy explosion fest of just insane things. Like the amount of insane crap that happened to me when I was playing like Far Cry 3 as well was just ridiculous, where, you know, I'd start taking on a few guys and then two lizards would come along and just take out the other guys, and then another truck would appear and crash into the other one, and before you know it, you've got like this firestorm of like chaos happening all around like this one. And often you weren't even looking for anything, you're just like going along to somewhere else, and it just kind of happens sort of around you. It just kind of generates and just appears and bees there. So, but it's just an amazing game for it. But Far Cry 4, just what an amazingly beautiful world as well they created. Just Nepal, and I think for me as well, it was a little bit like I went to Nepal a few years ago, and so there was a lot of stuff for me where I was like, oh my god, it just looks so, you know, I kind of like had a little bit of a rapport with the game. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about the way that they designed it. I loved the narrative and the characters. I obviously don't want to talk about that too much because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but yeah, the main story of the game, it just is so involving, and very much like Far Cry 3, it just sucks you into the game. I love immersion in games, and for me, that was just a massively immersive game. Did you play that as well, Minx? Did you have any opinion with it?
I'm gonna massively disagree with you here.
I know, yeah.
Far Cry 4 was my biggest disappointment of the year in terms of a video game. Far Cry 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. In fact, I gave it Game of the year it came out, just to clarify that I loved Far Cry 3.
Okay.
I thought Blood Dragon was amazing as well. Blood Dragon was in my top 5 for last year. I loved it.
Yeah, I love it.
Far Cry 4, I absolutely hated.
Oh, come on.
I played it for like 7 hours, and I can honestly say I didn't really enjoy any of it beyond the first like maybe 2 hours.
Really?
Really, I found it very frustrating. I found the way. Okay, so just an example. This is something that made me just truly throw my controller at the PlayStation and walk out the room. Okay, so I was like I liberated an outpost like you do in Far Cry 3 as well. I was heading down the road, and then I suddenly got the message: the outpost is under attack. Go back and defend it. And I was like, no, I don't care. I don't give a shit. And I tried to leave. It was like, mission failed. And then there were so many instances of me wandering outside mission zones while I'd been trapped into a mission and the mission failing that I got so frustrated. I mean, there was a mission where I had to race across the map to like drop off supplies or some shit, like a side mission.
Yeah.
I failed it maybe 20 times, and then I was just done. That was like the cap of my patience. I found the stealth was fairly bullshit as well. I feel that the enemies could like just, sometimes I'd shoot someone and the other ones would like hear and they'd come over and I'd be gone. It would suddenly go mission failed and things like that. And I just used to get really frustrated by it. I don't like the stealth at all. I didn't like the enforced stealth bits. I just think I should be able to mow everyone down if I want to. And
I'll give you that.
it just felt like it was trying to hold my hand way more than Far Cry 3 ever did, and that frustrated the fuck out of me. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
it was a beautiful world. I
Yeah.
liked Min as a baddie
Yeah.
from what I
Yeah.
saw of him. He seemed cool.
Yeah.
I really liked the premise, and I really wanted to love it. I mean, I wouldn't have played it for like 7 or 8 hours if I thought it was absolute shit to begin with, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I really didn't like it. It did
I'll
nothing
give you
for me,
that.
and I felt awful. It was awful.
Yeah. First of all, I'll say, like, I love it. I always love that we disagree, because it's fantastic to have disagreements about things you can really discuss well. But yeah, I'll give you that. It is one thing that actually really bothers me about the game. Of all the things, like, you always have like your little niggles with games, but for me, yeah. That is actually something that does piss me off with Far Cry. Not just with this, but also Far Cry 3. Because it's like, you have this huge open expansive world where you can kind of wander around and you can kind of do whatever you want to. But then when you actually go to do something, it's like, right, now you're locked into this. And you're like, oh. And even if you kind of want to be, sometimes you want to be a little bit away, you want to make a huge flank, and you're like, oh, but I'm restricted within this certain section. And it's like, it can be as much as like, okay, well, I'd rather go around this rock because otherwise I'll be seen. Literally no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that, but they kind of lock you into it. So yeah, I will give you that. Actually, that's like one thing that's super frustrating about the game. But I think, again, it just, like I said, it can be one of those games which comes down on people one side or the other. And I think for me, like, the positives of the game outweighed the negatives of the game. But I think, again, you can just have a difference of opinion there. But Far Cry 4 for me was a really big success for me this year. I loved the hell out of it. What's your next one, Minx?
My next one is going to be Rust.
Rust.
Rust is this is kind of cheating because it came out December of last year, but fuck it, I'm going to pick it anyway. Rust is an arsehole simulator similar to DayZ, Nether. Think of other games like it. I guess like Infestation, if you really want to talk about some shit,
Yeah,
things like that. And it's basically the problem is the game has two incarnations. About halfway through this year, the devs decided to scrap everything they've done on it so far and start afresh on it. So it now has two versions. It has Legacy, the original, and the new experimental branch, as it were. So it's almost two different games. Last year, especially in January and February, I played the original version a lot. This involves being dumped naked into a sort of like an unusual sort of like, it was almost like a Western type landscape, I'd say.
Yeah.
With zombies, and you could build bases, large bases, and get technology. You had to like find resources and build guns and defend yourself, and basically eventually at the top of the tech tree you could get C4 and blow up other people's bases and things like that. And it was a very unusual and interesting take on the survival genre, as it were. I had a lot of fun being an arsehole to people. I remember several incidents of making friends fight to the death at gunpoint so one of them could live, and then shooting the other one anyway because it was funny.
Yeah, that sounds like you.
I remember chasing people down. I remember lying flat on the roof of a big building, sniping people and laughing manically as they all dropped dead. I basically did lots of horrible things to people and loved every single minute of it. And it was one of the most entertaining times I've had. I recently started playing Experimental again, the newer branch. And while I would say it's nowhere near as finished as the original was as of yet, I'm still enjoying it a lot, and I've had a lot of fun with it so far. And it's, making me think, how I miss this. Like, the other day I was playing with Wade, Ohm, and Tesh, and we were just heading out into the world to go hunting humans. With guns. We were going to look innocent, call people over to us, and then shoot them with a shotgun was the plan. And as we left our house, there was someone just literally outside our front door staring at us like, up. And then within seconds, Wade had just like blown his head off. And it was just some of the fun. It's just so satisfying to be a scumbag. And I would say the game would be nowhere near as fun on your own or without a group of people to ally with.
Yeah.
It's still... it's one of the best survival experiences I've had. I liked it a lot more than my experiences in DayZ, because it's much easier to pick up and play.
Okay.
It's not as easy to pick up and play as Nether originally was. Nether is much more hardcore than it used to be. When it originally came out, Nether was really good because you could just hop onto it and do a few hours as recording, and you get footage, as it were. Whereas Rust requires a time sink in between Daisy and Nether. It's a lot more action packed than Daisy, and you're far likely to run into people more.
Yeah.
So it doesn't require like within you could have a good session of Rust in like 3 to 4 hours, as opposed to sitting down for 6 or 7 and
Yeah.
tooling up in Daisy, if you know what I mean. And that's what I like about it the most. It's just highly entertaining to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What would you say were like the main
Yeah.
significant differences then between the two versions, like now that they've moved on? Does it actually create like different experiences for you as a player?
Yes and no. I mean, it's got a completely different crafting system and new items as a result of that. There's much more like primal hunting things like spears and stuff, which weren't in the original, which are nice.
Hmm.
Makes it feel more like its own survival game rather than one that's trying to copy the zombie type. There's no more zombies either. It's all wildlife in the
That's
new
good.
version. There's it doesn't seem to have as much depth to the crafting at the moment, but I feel that it's polished. There will be a lot more, and the building of houses promises to be a lot more interesting and unique. And the fact you can build nearly anywhere, you can like have like houses overhanging on cliffs with like support beams and stuff, and there's just a lot more variety to the building. And the building was always a key thing, but everyone's buildings in the original kind of look the same. As in this one, I feel there's a lot more variety to what you can do with the building creation. That's a big selling point for experimental to me. Like, I really like that side of things.
And like your style of playing with these games is not similar to my style of playing with these games. So would you say like if you have a more kind of serious or even like passive approach to it, do you think that's like a legitimate way of playing this and that it would actually be feasible? Or is it going to be that you're going to be trying to do stuff and some person like your little team will come along and then just shoot me in the face while I'm trying to like carve things or something?
Probably. Like yesterday, we killed like maybe 12 people back to back,
No.
and obviously when you die, you lose everything. So
No.
I, I did end up dying. Someone shotgunned me in the end. We attacked this base,
Yeah.
and while we were ultimately triumphant and got away with their stuff, I died, and another Wade died in the process of the attack on the base.
That's pretty
So
good. That's pretty good. For anybody that doesn't know as well, does it play out in the same way that DayZ is, like listing of servers, and then you just like hop into one, or is it kind of you
yeah,
have
exactly.
to set up? Yeah, it is more like that. Cool,
You hop into a server, and then off you go.
good stuff. I have to say, like, from what I first saw it, I was just like, it looks very DayZ-ish, and it's kind of like people standing around laughing at each other's genitalia, but like. There's a lot of penises in it, right? Right? Is this the way
Yeah,
it is?
there are a lot of penises in it.
So that immediately for me was like a warning sign. And then I was like, but from what you've described, and I've seen how the game looks and graphically it's quite nice. I think I would be interested to try it. So I think I will look at this game because whilst it seems completely mad, I think sometimes it's good to be mad. So I might actually try this out for myself. Right, should we go on my next one then?
Yes.
For me, Long Dark. Now, Long Dark it's still in like its kind of early stages, I guess. The Long Dark is basically a wilderness survival. The idea is that you've crashed in like I think it's supposed to be like northern Canada, like wilderness, and you're basically in this kind of sort of tundra wasteland of snow and trees and rock, and there's a few little outposts and huts and fishing huts around a lake. There's like a little sort of forestry commissioner's office or something like this that you can go and stay in, but it also is semi-apocalyptic. It kind of hints at that something has happened because there's sort of dead people all over the place, frozen into the ground, or like you go into one of the houses and you're looking around, there's no lights, and there's a guy in the corner like slumped over dead, and you're like, okay, what's going on here? But basically with the Long Dark, the idea is for you to just survive as long as possible. This seems to be a very popular theme amongst a lot of sort of indie games now, is this kind of survival thing, like how long can you survive? And the Long Dark is just really fantastic with the way it does this. Also at night time, if you go out, there are like wolves and stuff at night, and you just see them as like, it's brilliant the way it comes. You'll be walking along, and there's just like little green eyes, like when you see animals at night, you just see the lights of their eyes in the darkness, and then you can never tell like how far away they are, and then before you know it, they've got you on the floor, and they're like teeth in your face, like trying to rip your face off. It's absolutely terrifying. I definitely lost it. Like one point when I was being chased by all these wolves. But it's quite brutal in the way that you get damaged and hurt. You'll be bleeding and you have to like heal yourself in a certain way. You have to cut wood to make fire and lighting. You only have always limited amounts of stuff, so you can make like little paper rolls to light a fire with, but your main things are like fire, water, food, and staying warm as well. That's your main things to be doing in the game. Criticisms of the game, though, basically the first carnation that they had of it, it was quite difficult. It was very hard. You were limited in like the way that you could make things in terms of like wood and fuel and water to drink and all this kind of stuff. They basically simplified it a lot, which is kind of annoying because it's still tricky, but it's not as difficult. It was supposed to be like this very difficult survival simulator, I suppose, in a way. And they just kind of simplified it back and made it a lot more easy. I'm going to probably be getting onto it again this week, actually, on my stream, and sort of looking at where we are with the game. They also added in like another whole area, and there's going to be a narrative as well. They're going to build in like a story for the game. Right now, it's just kind of like how long can you survive, but there will actually be a story. So I think like as the game progresses and as they develop it, because it's still in its kind of early development, so it hasn't had like technically a full release, I suppose, but it's ongoing and it's a game that I really, really enjoy. But we'll see where we are with the game and when this story comes in. But I think it's got a ton of potential. They've only done like a few areas, but they can continue to expand those areas and build more and more. And so this idea of like how long you survive, and they could still, I think, refine it back. I think perhaps they simplified it just to allow people to kind of get a feel of like what it is they're trying to do, right? And then maybe when they get to a full release, they'll make it more difficult again. Or perhaps, right now you can't adjust that. Maybe when you actually have the full release, you'll be able to adjust those difficulties so that if you want, it's easier to survive and you can make it more difficult. But have you seen this game and played it, Minx, at all?
Yeah, I have. I played it when it first came out, actually, probably the more hardcore version, I guess.
Yeah.
I survived for like maybe 35, 40 days on my first run.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was relatively good at it, actually. I did enjoy it, and I do like survival games. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything bad to say about it. I really enjoyed what I played. It was very atmospheric. I was genuinely scared at times. I saw the enemies, like the wolves in the distance, and I was scared by them. I thought it had a good sense of scale and realistic environment and that kind of thing. I would say that it certainly isn't for everyone, but I did enjoy a lot of what I played.
Yeah, I think like visually it's a very nice game. I think the main reason I picked it as one of my games for 2014 is just because of its potential. I think it's interesting because we were just talking about Rust, and Rust is kind of like also a survival game, but it's totally different to this. And I think as someone like myself who enjoys more serious games, because that's just how I am as a player, this kind of appeals to me sort of more than Rust because of its seriousness and it's kind of the fact that it's just you versus the environment. And I think, like I say, I picked this game because I like the way it looks and I like the way they've sort of created it. It has a lot of potential. So I'd be interested to see, like, as they push its development forward, where they actually go with it. I think they need to add plenty of content to really get your teeth into with this game, and like any game. If they don't, it'll be a bit like, okay, so done this and then move on, right? But if they add enough content to it, and if they actually look to providing more content to it, I think it could be really awesome. So, yeah, that's one of mine for this year.
I think one thing I'd like to add, actually, I feel that type of game, I feel that for me to be really sold on it, it does need to add a multiplayer mode. I know that kind of breaks a story because two of you would have to end up there or whatever.
Yeah.
But for example,
like a co-op or full-on multiplayer.
Yeah, like a co-op, a co-op, not like Rust.
Yeah.
I think that the more player versus environment type stuff works very well if you could have like 2-player or even 4-player, I guess. But I think 2 works better for that kind of game. And I've been playing the Forest cooperative because the Forest added co-op to its single player only mode a few months ago, and it's a lot more. It's still broken as fuck, like it always has been, but it's still a lot more enjoyable than it was single player because it's just nice to have company and the two of you can work together. And I guess my mind's always thinking, oh, how do I make a good YouTube video when I do stuff? And I feel that with 2 people, that kind of stuff is always a lot more entertaining and gripping to watch. And I could certainly see if they added a co-op mode at some point this year, I could see myself playing that a lot because I do think that's the way to go for making that kind of game to appeal to a more mass market without turning it into an arsehole simulator like DayZ or Rust or whatever.
Yeah, I think it is. It does make it more engaging, and we do live in a world now where you are basically always online and talking to other people, and so being able to kind of you have the option of, hey, do you want to come play with me and do this game? I think co-op, if not multiplayer, is definitely something that a lot of games just kind of look and should have now. I mean, Alien didn't have that because they wanted to focus on the single player, but I think this is a different kind of game where you're like, okay, I'm going to stay here and do this, you go and get this, so it works in a different way there, and yeah, I think it would be a positive thing to have definitely for the game.
Yeah, there's certain games don't work with multiplayer. I don't think Alien would work with multiplayer, but there's some games that you feel like co-op would be good, like you'd enjoy it. No. Okay, so my fourth favorite games of last year is going to be The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which is a first-person horror adventure experience, I would say, with a Lovecraft type theme to it.
Yeah,
it's almost like a first-person point-and-click game, and it's a very interesting and unique experience. I would say that I wouldn't say it's totally unique because it's actually very similar to Murdered Soul Suspect, which came out earlier in the year as well, which is also one of my favorite games, but didn't quite make the cut for this list.
Yeah,
but in fact, I would venture to say in some ways it's incredibly similar to Murdered Soul Suspect. But anyway, it's still a very unique concept that I've only really seen pretty much this year, and I would also say that it has a better story and better theme and better general overall feel to it than Murdered Soul Suspect, especially in the visuals. It's the best looking game I've played this year, maybe with the exception of Final Fantasy XIV, but in general it is an absolutely gorgeous and beautiful game, jaw-droppingly so. The game doesn't hold your hand either. You are like a paranormal detective who has received a letter from a young boy who you believe has sort of same paranormal powers you do, and you think he's in trouble. So you head to this town. I'm not even really sure where the town is now I think about it. Maybe sort of like somewhere in America, maybe. I don't really know. But anyway, you head to this town and you are trying to investigate what's happened to this boy. And you're kind of just dumped in this world and off you go, really. The game has lots of small short stories that would be very much Lovecraft type stories, and you solve the puzzle for each individual story. You can do them in any order, if you know what I mean. So you literally, it's very open and very can be very confusing, I think, for people who aren't expecting that, because it doesn't hold your hand at all. It's literally like, and that's it. There's no tutorial, no nothing. You just have to figure things out. So
that's good. That's good. I like that. It puts it like a challenge for people, and that's one thing that like sucks you into the world, because you can't kind of stand back. You've got to like get in there and just get on with it,
Exactly. So the puzzles vary. I mean, there's lots of individual ones that I'm not going to spoil, but one of the main meats is solving like crime scenes. Find a body, and you have to use your psychic powers to put together the events leading up to the murder and exactly how it happened. And you have to do that. You have to find like the murder weapon and things like that and restore them to the positions they were in at certain points of the murder. And it sounds quite complicated, and I guess it is, but really well done, and it's really exciting to see like everything piece itself together as you like detect exactly what happened. And I mean, there's some other epic bits as well. There's like tentacle monsters from the depths of the ocean, like Elder God type stuff later on in it, and there's undead and various other unpleasantness at various intervals. I mean, I don't really want to spoil anything because the story is so unique and so interesting. I will just say that it's a really creepy adventure, a detective game, horror game, and it does well of conveying a total sense of dread without using jump scares as well.
I think another game as well that kind of, it doesn't have a massive playtime in terms of its overall length, right? But it's like enough to kind of keep you there into it.
6-7 hours, I would say. 6-7 hours, maybe.
Yeah, which I think is a good amount of time for the game. I think as well, like there's many other games where you do the kind of investigation elements, of course. So you've got things like LA Noire, and then you've got things like Remember Me as well, where she has to kind of do her memory things, where she searches back through the scenes. So I always kind
Yeah.
of love those investigation elements with the games, where you kind of have to look at what's going on, and you kind of have to piece the
Yeah.
puzzles together. It's like
Murdered Soul Suspect has that same system now, I think
yeah,
about it as well. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I always enjoy that, and then it kind of pulls on into. But I think like Ethan Carter, it's just got, like you say, it's very expansive in the sort of the places that it goes to and where it takes you in the game. But again, I am definitely a fan of not hand holding people in games. I'm starting to fit like it's just so prolific at the moment, like where games just insist on holding your hand through and saying like, come on, this is what you do next, and it's like, oh, just throw them in the deep end and let them figure it for themselves, because I think
Exactly.
as an old school gamer, and like you as well, that's what it used to be like, and it's just moving away from that more and more as it's like this bigger market. So I think it's great when you get games like this that just throw people into it and say, there you go, figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd like to clarify as well, actually, I saw like a few comments when we last talked, like I said that I often dismiss games because of difficulty or just because of time constraints and things. And by no means would I consider myself like a really hardcore gamer or whatever. Is while I do this as a job, I have to, I like things to be relatively easy. I mean, I wouldn't say that Ethan Carter was easy. I spent hours on some of the puzzles, like thinking things through. But at the same time, I didn't feel frustrated and
Yes,
I didn't feel like I was losing progress. And
yes,
I think it's a good example of how to do a non-handholdy game without being brutally difficult and rather being more mysterious. You feel like you're
yeah,
gradually uncovering stuff over time rather than hitting a brick wall, if
yeah.
you know what I mean.
I think that's a good like line to walk down, and I wish there were more games like that, because I feel like as gaming has become more expansive now, there's loads and loads and loads more people playing titles, especially on consoles, right? But I feel like just handholding people because they may be new. There's a lot of new gamers coming in now, like in the last sort of 5 years or whatever, and so putting stuff out there that just handholds is not a positive thing to do. But having a game like this where it doesn't do that, but at the same time it doesn't punish you endlessly. Because again, like you say, you're very busy with your YouTube, and so you don't want a game where you just kind of, it's so difficult. You think, okay, I just haven't got time to figure this out. I have friends who, they're not stupid people and they love video games, but they're not like I am in the fact that I will sit down for like 10, 12 hours and just solidly play through something, because I'm that kind of more hardcore gamer, because I always have been. But they're not like that. They love games, but they're not, that's never going to happen. So having a game like this, which challenges you, but doesn't punish you, I think is a really positive thing. And I wish there was more of that. I wish more devs like realized, okay, that's a positive thing to do, because it seems to be one thing or the other. It's either too crazy or it's just too soft, and having something nice in between that is I think that's positive. Right, shall we go on to my
Exactly.
next one? Okay,
Yes.
my next one is This War of Mine. This War of Mine has been amazing. I was very pleased actually that it got so lauded, and it was so not celebrated, but a lot of people really, really enjoyed it. A lot of the big producers and people spoke about this game. I actually got to see it. Again, I got to see it a little bit early, and as soon as I got hands on with this game, I was just like, I love this game. It just approached such a fantastic point of view. This War of Mine focuses on, you are basically a civilian in a war-torn city. The city is basically desolate and destroyed, and you are trying to eke out a survival. It's another survival game. There's so many survival games this year. You are a household of about 3 or maybe 4 people, and you have to manage their time between surviving at home. Again, you've got to count all those conditions, like have they got enough food, warmth, are they happy, and then you also have to send them out to scavenge for things. But you can make some brutal decisions, and it becomes very difficult. Some guy comes back from a nighttime raid and he's maybe taken a little bit of injury from something. He was trying to get some food from a house, and maybe someone there gave him a bit of a beating before he managed to run away. Comes back to the house and he's injured. Well, okay, so now you've got to send somebody else out the next night, but maybe they are not the best scavenger, and they can't carry as much, or they're just not so good at fighting. That guy's now back at the house, but at night time other people will try to come and scavenge from you. So if you don't have people there to defend it, then they got to sleep sometime as well. And sleeping takes a reasonable amount of time within it basically assigns you like a time period for your day and your night. And then you have to, do these activities throughout them. But it's really amazing. It's kind of like it's a side-scrolling kind of game, but they've done it very. It's very nicely done in the 3D, and it's got a nice graphic style to it. So it's kind of like it's not fully rendered. It's got almost like a sort of illustrative style to some elements within it. So it's really a gorgeous game to look at. And then back at the house, you can kind of bring items back and construct things for yourself, like a radio and like more of a stove and things to keep yourself warm and fed and all these kind of things. But it also it's interesting how it focuses on the civilians in this city rather than the military, because someone who plays a lot of militaristic games, this was a fantastic sort of snapshot of the other side. So it's like the people that are left trying to survive in this city, which is tearing itself apart from civil war. And then you have really difficult moral decisions to make as well. So for example, I was going out on a little raid one evening to try and find supplies for our house, and one of my people in my house was sick. They've got, and as soon as they're sick, they can't do anything pretty much. They move very slowly and they perform. And if you make them do stuff, it makes them more sick, basically, which it would. And they're struggling with the cold. So I needed to find some medication for this guy. There was a house in my little area which was listed as potentially having some medication. So I went there, and basically it was like an elderly couple living in this home, or sort of moderately elderly, I guess like 60 years oldish. The guy challenges me and he's like, "Get out of our house." And I was just like, "Fuck you, buddy." Put him down. Put him down. And then he went down and he was a bit injured. And I was like, okay. So I ran through the house, meds. And then it was like, basically when he was finding the meds, it was like, these people might need the medication. Should I take it or not? And I was just like, whatever, we need it. So I grabbed it, went back to the house. A couple of days later, I needed some more food and a couple of other supplies, and I knew that house was kind of soft because the people there weren't in a really state to challenge us. So I was like, okay, that's good to go back to. Went back and I was searching around, but the people weren't there. I was just like, where have they gone? Went upstairs and they were in bed, and I was like, oh, they're here. Oh wait, no, they're dead. And basically because I took their medication, they just died, and they're just there in their bed, dead at their house. I was like, oh my God, because I took their meds, they died. So it's really horrible moral decisions that you have to make in the game. Other little elements, people will come to your house and trade with you as well. So it's just a very encompassing, very immersive game, and it just kind of covers an aspect that I haven't seen of these kind of genres before.
It's I liked it. I mean, I would say that for me, it was a bit too slow paced at times.
Oh, Miggs, come on, you're doing it to me again.
But I didn't hate it.
Okay,
I don't think it was a bad game.
Yeah.
I guess I was like when they were rooting, I was like, come on, just drink all day, just something happen, sort of thing at times, I guess. But in general, I didn't think it was a bad game, and I thought it was an interesting game that made interesting moves.
Yeah.
I think it was probably a bit too strategic for my small, needing constant stimulation brain. But
next time we do this, I'm going to crucify your choices.
You didn't play most of mine.
I know. I'm going to go and play them, and we'll talk about this another day, right? Go on. Yeah, go on.
It wasn't bad. I don't think. I'm not going to say it. Not like I don't hate it like I hated Far Cry 4. I put in a few hours into it, and I enjoyed what I played of it. It was just a bit too slow paced for me. In general, I didn't think it was a bad game, and I could understand why it would make lists and why it was so critically acclaimed.
Yeah, I think, again, like some other choice, they tried to do something different. And I think that's something that's a big deal for me these days, because there is just so much stuff that's just churned out, And
I think for the most part on our list, that's what I would say a lot of the titles have done so far. Except Far Cry 4.
Yeah. Shush. And I think okay, between you and me, we've played a lot of games, and I think that's why we're kind of gravitating towards these games which are, they've tried to do something different, because it's really hard now to find games which do things differently and do them well differently as well. That's really the critical thing. A lot of games try to do stuff, but they just fail at it because for one reason or another. But these games have really succeeded in what they set out to do, the premise of their titles, and so that's why I really enjoyed it. Right, have you got one more, or are we on to our final thing now?
We're on to our final thing, which is the same game.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So we can't disagree on this, surely?
We can't disagree. No, I mean, this is Dragon Age Inquisition, everyone. Which would be my second choice. It was better between that and Always Sometimes Monsters for Game of the Year. me and Luton both really, really, really fucking enjoyed it. I think
Yeah.
a lot. Um,
You
I
go
loved
first.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was one of the best things I played in ages. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal. It has amazing storytelling. It has amazing characters. I love games where I can make my character and be my character. And I mean, I don't often harp on about this, but I like games where I obviously can express my sexuality, and I really enjoyed the romance options in it as well. I really enjoyed customizing my character. I was a canary, by the way, which I thought was awesome. I loved my fucking demon horn things. They're fucking great. I just love the general atmosphere and world. And while I would say that my main gripe with the game, I would say that some of the quests didn't feel as consequential as BioWare titles normally do. I felt this was like an evolution of BioWare into being BioWare combined with Bethesda sort of thing, almost, if you know what I mean. It still was absolutely amazing, incredibly satisfying to play, and I feel it was so hard to pick between that. And the only reason I picked Always Sometimes Monsters more because I felt I just felt I enjoyed being a psychopath. Dragon Age Inquisition doesn't let you really be a psychopath. It
Yeah.
lets you be good. There's no real moral choices, which I felt was a bit of a letdown compared to its BioWare titles.
Yeah.
And you really have to be good. Inquisition. You can be harsh, but you're still good, if you know what I mean. And I feel that was my main that and the quests were my main gripe with the game. Overall, it was still a fantastic experience, wonderfully done. Another phenomenal title from BioWare, who I'd been worried were losing their way a bit, but really seemed to pull things back with this, in my opinion. And can't wait for their next title, whatever that is going to be. Presumably the Mass Effect prequel, or whatever they're doing at the moment. And it just gave me a lot of hope for AAA RPGs again, and I fucking loved it. And it was just one of the best games I played this year, if not this decade.
Wow, that's massive praise, right? That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this game as well. I mean, I hadn't played previous Dragon Age games, so that was interesting for me to come in at this point. But I got a few friends who have played them a lot, so that was good because it gave me a little grounding before I sort of started with the game. But it's so expansive and just massive, and yet again, like another immersive game, which I love. Just everything that you do and approach just feels so significant, and the way I like the fact that it gives you the freedom of choice, because that's always such a good element to game. You can obviously follow the story axis if you want to, but you can go off on these other things. It's a game that you just end up pouring hours into, it's just like one of these games just as a black hole, and just time disappears and you're like, what, that was 8 hours, like it just disappears. So that's always a really good sign when you can sit down and the day's over and you think you've only just started playing. That's a really good sign. I love the combat. I thought it was very interesting, actually, because from someone who's played a lot of kind of fantasy sort of MMO stuff and bits and pieces like this, because I played WoW for the longest time, this game seemed to walk a very, for me, like, and again, someone who just came in new to it, I thought this game walked like a kind of interesting middle line between, say, like World of Warcraft and Skyrim. That's what it kind of felt for me. It was like that kind of the combat system and everything. Yeah, it's like the kind of middle ground. It's a bit more arcadey, but without being, really full on. But
it's not as arcadey. Dragon Age 2, for example, plays almost like Diablo. It's really arcadey.
Yeah.
As this one was a bit more in depth, but it's not as in depth as the first, which is like a CRPG style. So it was like, it was a middle ground. And to be fair, I felt that worked pretty well. I thought it was did a good job.
Yeah, all my gripes with it were small as well. Like there was you can choose to have the UI like sort of semi off and thing. I kind of wish there was sort of some more UI options, so you could just choose to like disable those things. So if you wanted to, you can make it like a little bit more cinematic. So as you're enjoying the environment, because there was times when I was wandering out, I was just like, man, I don't want all this crap on screen. I just want to sort of enjoy it. I wish that they put that in there. There's a few things as well when it came to like customizing your gear that can be a little bit of a pain. You have to like go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and sort of changing things in and out. And again, I felt like that could have been refined and made a little bit more easygoing. But overall, it was all pretty minor stuff. The rest of it I thought was really fantastic. The actual combative system as well was really interesting, and I like that a lot. The fact that it can be completely real time, or you can kind of pause and instruct people, and also the fact that you can have some control over your AI companions, because AI for me in games is something that always drives me bananas. Like I usually desperately try to avoid having any AI help whatsoever unless it's mandatory, because you just end up in like a Resident Evil 5 situation where you're just like, oh my god, what are you doing now? And it's just like, oh, it's like that kind of thing. In Dragon Age Inquisition, I didn't feel like that. I was actually like, oh, okay, thanks very much. They're kind of doing what they're supposed to and things. So yeah, it was all really good. I just loved everything about the game. I thought it was fantastic. And I also was pleased that sometimes with these kind of titles, if you're new to it, you can't get on board, right? But with this, you really could. You didn't really need to have played the other games. You can just get involved and kind of get straight in, and you don't feel totally lost. One thing that I did feel was I felt like the kind of overall narrative and the story was maybe a little slow to start. Like it kind of, they sort of establishing like, okay. It takes a little while to kind of get going, and then you're sort of full on into it and things. But overall, I just massively enjoyed it. I thought it was a fantastic game. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, not a lot else I can add to that. It was great, and you should definitely play it.
Yeah, definitely. That was our look at 2014, guys. So drop down in the comments below what you have been playing in the last year. What were your massive titles for this year? I'll be interested to sort of see what other people have been putting forward. Do you agree with our choices? Do you disagree? Minx, you got anything to add here as we finish up?
I just wanted to add, like, I mean, I said Far Cry 4 was one of my biggest disappointments. Is there anything that you really were let down by this year?
We got controversial. I'm trying to think of like other titles that came out this year that really let me down, but I don't know, not really.
You know what else I picked? I picked The Evil Within. That really let me down as well.
Oh, actually, maybe, yeah, because I tell you what, right? And here's the interesting thing with that game. I will put that forward. It was never like going to be massively on my radar, that game. But The Evil Within, they really pushed it and promised so much with that title. But from playing it at EGX this year, I was just like, okay. Like, they really pushed it hard, and it didn't blow me away whatsoever. And I think a lot of people said that as well. But I tell you what, I will say, what did disappoint me, and it was no specific title, it just comes back to what I've spoken about before with like hype. And, Evil Within there is a good example of that. It's where they sort of like, they push the marketing so much and they hype it so much, like we spoke about on the previous sort of podcast video. And then it falls flat, and then that's what's disappointing. So I think rather than choose a specific title which disappointed me the most, I think what I will say is that the combination of like the relentless sort of upping in marketing of 2014, because it's been so much more significant, I feel, than in previous years. That's what's disappointed me. The fact that there's great titles like Alien where they didn't do that, and it proves you don't need to do that. They just let the game kind of speak for itself. They teased people a little bit, worked perfectly. So I think, that's just my thing that disappointed me, was that like people, they get these games get your expectations up and then it falls flat. I think it's better to kind of put your game forward and let it speak for itself. But I think what I would say specifically though with Evil Within was, they really built it up. They really said like, this is going to be the thing to play, and everyone's just like, oh my god, it's going to be amazing.
Resident Evil 4 all over again. That's what it was billing itself as. Itself as the next Resident Evil 4. That's what it was billing itself as. And in some ways it was like Resident Evil 4, but the problem with that is the fact that Resident Evil 4 is really fucking old now, and it had terrible controls, it had terrible confusing sections that you just don't expect from a game anymore, and Evil Within just kept those. Yeah. It was one of the main problems with it.
Instead of telling people what the game is going to be, just let them decide what it's going to be. Put it out there, let people for themselves, let gamers decide what it's going to be, and and then afterwards, once it's been really successful, then you can laud it up and say, yeah, everyone agrees it's this, so anyway, there we go.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for watching. This has been our year in review of 2014. Remember to leave a like, a favorite, and a comment, and subscribe to both our channels. There'll be links in the description to Luton's channel. Otherwise, I'll see you guys really fucking soon, I guess. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Have a great 2015.